In this lesson, we'll learn how to bring the images of our bus into our type document and free transform them to fit onto the surfaces they belong on. All right, fantastic. So I have here the Lesson 7 Begin file open. I also have up here my Bus Extended file opened up. And you can see I've gone ahead and extended all those panels down to the point that where they're pretty much flush with the tires. And I've also got the front bus document that is masked open as well here. So let's go ahead and start with the side here. Now I've got a bus extended layer here, and you can see that is masked out completely. So that's what we want. I'll just go ahead and grab my move tool by hitting the V key, and I'm simply going to just drag this over into my Lesson 7 Begin file. And we'll just hold Shift and just kind of drop it right there. Now you can see that pretty much fills up my canvas in this particular document. Actually, it's a little bit larger, but that's good, because that means we have all of that resolution at our disposal. So the first thing we want to do here in terms of preserving that resolution is we want to convert this particular bus extended layer into a smart object. So let me go ahead and rename that to bus side, something like that. We can actually collapse that 3D layer down just like so. And I'll right click on that bus side, and we're going to convert that to a smart object. So a smart object is a different type of a layer. You can see there's a little icon right here. And what that means is I can come in and I can make transformations to the smart object, but all the resolution that was contained in this layer originally is going to be maintained. And all we have to do to get to that is simply double click on that little icon. We'll get this message. We can click OK. And you can see now I'm inside the smart object. So we can make changes inside this separate file. So with that done, let's do this. We'll go ahead and go to Edit, Free Transform. That's also Control-T on your keyboard. And we can probably come over here and just drop the opacity of the layer down just a little bit so we can kind of see our type. And we'll zoom in just a little bit. And I want to start to kind of shrink this down. I'm holding Shift and grabbing that corner control. And we're going to begin to start aligning this. Now, there is a perspective transformation that we could be using, but personally, I think it'll probably just be easier to try and begin to line this up on our own. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Control key, and if I mouse over that corner right there, I can now grab that freely. So I'll just hold Shift, so I'm moving up and down with that. I'll begin to kind of stretch these guys up to match the type. We're still a little bit large, so I need to Shift and stretch that down a little bit, sort of like so. We'll go down to about there, and I'll just kind of bring this down sort of like that. And we're just kind of at this point, like I said, we're basically matching up this bus, this 2D bus, on the front face of our type here. So now I've got this, and I need to shift this entire side down a little bit. I can hold the Control key down and grab that middle control right there, and I can just kind of shift that down. Again, I can hold Shift, and we can sort of align that to where it's moving in a vertical fashion. And we'll just go ahead and I'm actually going to kind of pull this guy down some to right about there. We'll pull this guy up a little bit to right about there. Now at this point, if we look kind of at the top of the bus, we're going to have to add some paint here at some point, because what I'm seeing here is this bus had kind of this bulge right here, and I'd like there to be a consistent white streak along the top of these letters that represents kind of the top of our bus. So I'm going to make sure that I can see, and we're going to give a little bit of room from this black edge to the top of the letter, and we're going to think about the perspective here and having the same distance down here, only it's further away. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab that by holding Control, and we'll just drag him down just a little bit like so. Now at this point, something to also consider is the position of the tires. So right now you can see my tires really are lined up sort of with the gap of the R right here, which means that it's not going to be visible at all. And then we've got this guy kind of partially visible on this face and then a little bit over here. But we got to remember that this negative space around our letter forms, we're not going to have the images of this bus available to us in those areas. So let me go ahead and bring the opacity back up, and I'll just hold Control, and I'm going to drag this guy back just a little bit. Now, you may say, Eddie, you're stretching that image out. And I'd say, yeah, you're absolutely right, I am. But we're doing it such a small amount that it's really not going to be all that noticeable. So I'm going to shift it a little bit to the left here. And if we need to, let's just come in here and drop the opacity again. Now I've got the wheel right over in here, which seems like a pretty good spot. Now this wheel right here, I'd like it ideally to be a little bit more on this right here. So we can come over here and just maybe squish that down a little bit here. And just kind of continue free transforming this until we get it where we'd like it to be. So maybe we come back over here and we shift the whole thing to the left just a little bit. Maybe right about there, and we squish it a little bit more. So now we're starting to get that wheel right over here on the M. Let's check the image itself and make sure it's not so distorted we can't really tell what's going on. So I think it's actually going to work just fine. So I want to go ahead and go with that here. Again, you know how to free transform this. I've showed you how, and I've showed you some of the considerations that I'm taking in terms of the position and kind of giving you a little insight into my future intentions, what we're going to be doing a little bit later in this course. But let's do this. Let me grab this guy and bring him up just a little bit. And I'm going to bring him out. Trying to match this curve up with the curve of the M. So that's pretty darn close. So I think that's going to work out great for us. Now, the one concern I have right now is that this vent is kind of hanging off the back of the letter O. I'll just kind of pull that over to right about there. We'll get that as much as we can onto the letter O. It's almost centered, which probably doesn't need to be centered there. I'm more concerned with the position of the wheels because, again, a bus is not a bus unless it has wheels, and we definitely want those wheels to be visible here. So once I'm happy with the position of all of my pixels in terms of this image, we can go ahead and hit enter to confirm this transformation. So let me come over and just kind of eyeball this baseline of our type, and that's looking good. I'm going to come up here and shift that just a little bit. And maybe shift this guy down just a little bit as well. We may have to do a little painting over the top edge of that window, but I think that's going to be really good for the most part. So let's go ahead and hit enter, confirming our transformation. We can come over here and really begin to ramp that opacity of that layer back up. And now you can see how that bus is starting to take shape. We now have the side of a bus. Now, here is something that's kind of important. Obviously, we're covering up all of the letter forms at this point. And, you know, if that was the case, if that was what we want to do, why didn't we just take a photo of a bus and stick it in here? No, we want this word. We want the word Metro to look like this bus. So let me hide that bus side layer for just a moment. And let's come over and select our 3D layer. And I'll just click away so we have the current view selected, again, based on that yellow rectangle. Now, what I can do at this point is I can use one of my quick selection tool or my magic wand tool to grab the outer face of these letters. So what I'd like to do first, though, is come over and just right-click away from that 3D object, switch that over to unlit texture, sort of like that. Now, that's going to allow me to select those letter forms without any interference from the lighting, so we don't have to worry about any kind of shadows affecting this. So I'm going to come over and let's drop that down in terms of tolerance to something relatively low, like 10. We'll select that letter M, and you can see I've got a pretty accurate selection there. So I'm going to hold Shift, come over and select these other letter forms, just like so. Fantastic. Now we can come over and come back to our bus layer with this selection made. And we need to create a layer mask for our smart object here. So I'll just simply come down and tap on that layer mask button. And there we go. We now have our bus in position here. Now, if you don't have your bus quite lined up like I do, maybe you need to free transform it a little bit more on the front face of these letter forms, make sure and unlink the mask. Because if you come in here and begin to free transform the smart object with the mask linked, it's going to transform the mask as well. The mask should be our static. We just want to be looking through the mask kind of like we're looking through a window at this bus. So make sure and just tap that little chain link right there, turn off the linking of the mask to the layer, and begin doing your free transforms, and then don't forget to come and link it back. All right, fantastic. So with that done, I'm going to go ahead and Control G to create a group of that selected smart object layer. We'll just call this side. And let's go for the front of the bus. Let me come over here and we'll grab this guy here. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing we did earlier in this course. Go ahead and apply that layer mask just like that. And now for the front of the bus, we could simply grab our lasso tool. I'm going to grab the normal lasso by hitting Shift L a few times. And I'm just going to come over here and lasso up the portion of this bus we need. So obviously we don't need the entire thing. We just kind of need that front side. I'll go ahead and grab a little bit of the side of the bus as well, just so we have a little bit extra to work with. Switch over to my Move tool. We'll just drag that over to our Lesson 7 Begin file. And I'm going to drop that in. All right, fantastic. So we'll go ahead and move this guy up, create a group for him, call this group Front, something like that. And we'll just call this Bus Front. All right, fantastic. So now we can go through the same process. Now, I am not going to create a smart object for this particular portion of the bus. And to tell you why, we're going to not only need to free transform this, we're probably going to be able, or probably going to need to use the liquefy filter on this as well. Now, we do have the ability to liquefy a smart object, but in liquefying this to fit onto this face right here, the one problem area with that is going to become this little guy right here. So what I would like to do is in the next lesson, we're going to begin to liquefy this, but I'm going to actually detach this mirror right here so he doesn't get crushed and bent around as we're liquefying this portion of the image, and then we'll just reattach it. So, but for right now, we can come in and use the same process, Control T to free transform, and we can begin to work at fitting this particular image onto kind of that particular portion of the extrusion. So we can come over here just like so. Maybe scale that down a little bit. I'm going to hold Control and grab this guy and then Shift to kind of shift the base of the bus to match the angle of the type. Kind of like so. And we'll go ahead and grab this guy, and I'm going to hold Control and Shift and move him up. Grab this guy, Control and Shift and move him down. And, you know, we've got a lot of extra information here. That corner of the bus is right here. The corner of the type is right here. So this really needs to come over a bit. To probably more like something like right about there. So I'm going to actually hold Shift and shrink it down a little bit more. But we have all of this extra data right over here. So we're just going to come in and begin to kind of crush that in. Just sort of like that. I'm not going to crush it in all the way, just to right about there, where I get kind of this top corner pretty close to lined up. Once we get that where we are pretty happy with it, we're ready to go ahead and begin liquefying. Now, I may come in here and tweak this free transform just a little bit more in between lessons, but in the next lesson we're going to focus on using the liquefy filter inside of Photoshop to sort of touch up this front of the bus so that it better fits on that extrusion on the side of our text. So we'll do that in our next lesson.